Hello and welcome to the Inner Codes of the Beautiful. We've been on an exploration of the various facets of the Sun, the manifestations of Suryas, the Adityas. Today we will see the penultimate Aditya, the Aditya that we see when Sun is in the sign of Aquarius or Kumbha, the Sun that we usually see between mid-March to mid-April. The form of Aditya that we see here is verily the form of Lord Vishwakarma, who is also known as Tvastā Adityā. Tvastā Adityā is the one who gives us, who blesses us with the power of Meda, or the power of our brains, our creative intelligence. He also hence gives us the skills to be able to use our creative intelligence and innovate. And through this process of innovation and application of our creative intelligence, we come up with solutions that lead to higher gains. The only one demand that Tvastā Adityā has is that one should be able to sacrifice oneself in the altar of work or karma yoga. The Rig Veda points out that Vishwakarma is the divine architect. He is the son of Lord Brahma, hence he is suffused with the creative abilities of the Supreme Being. Vishwakarma is also the one who gave us the Sthapatya Veda, which is one of the 4 Upavedas. Sthapatya Veda these days is popularly known as the Vastu Shastra. Essentially, it's a body of knowledge that deals with creation of any structure, physical structures or spaces that are in harmony with the environment and also which is in harmony with the cosmic energies. Vishwakarma had 5 sons, Manu, Maya, Tvashtir, Shilpi and Vishwagnya, and each of his 5 sons is credited with a specific area of knowledge when it comes to creation and innovation. And Vishwakarma is a very legendary character in the sense that his contributions span all the 4 yugas. In the Satya Yuga, Vishwakarma is supposed to have architected and created the Svarga Loka or the heavens. In the Treta Yuga, Vishwakarma created the Swarna Lanka, and in the Dwapara, Lord Krishna's palace in Dwaraka is credited to Vishwakarma, and in the Kali Yuga, Vishwakarma is the one who built the palace for the Pandavas at Indraprastha. Now there are very interesting stories behind some of these creations. Like for instance, in the Treta Yuga, when Lord Shiva and the goddess Parvati, following their marriage, they wanted to build a palace. They had commissioned Lord Vishwakarma to build them a suitable palace. And Vishwakarma came up with this stupendous creation, the awesome creation of Swarna Lanka, literally golden Lanka. And this was a stupendous and awesome place which was of a staggering beauty. And when it was completed, Lord Shiva had requested the Rishi Pulastya to perform the rituals for the Graha Pravesha, which is the formal entry into the new place of stay. And upon completion of the rituals of Graha Pravesha, Lord Shiva had asked for Rishi Pulastya to ask for anything in terms of his dakshina or any ritual offering that you give to the Brahmana who's officiated the rituals. And Rishi Pulastya was so taken in by the beauty of Swarnalanka that he asked for Swarnalanka itself as a dakshina. And Lord Shiva, of course, had to give what he asked, and Swarnalanka was given to Rishi Pulastya. But the story doesn't end there. Rishi Pulastya is the grandfather of Kubera, the god of wealth. So, Rishi Pulastya in turn gave the Swarnalanka to his grandson Kubera, and Kubera ruled from Swarnalanka till he was overthrown by his half-brother Ravana, and eventually Swarnalanka was the place of Ravana's stay. And when it comes to Indraprastha, again we have the story of the palace being so stupendously beautiful with so many optical illusions built into the structure that when Duryodhana along with the Kauravas visited the palace of the Pandavas, he had walked into a pool of water which appeared to be like any other floor. And when he fell, Draupadi, who was in a tier above in the hall, she saw Duryodhana falling into this pool of water, and she could not control her laughter. And she remarked that perhaps he was, after all, like his blind father. Of course, Duryodhana was infuriated, and that sowed the seeds for eventually what became the war of Mahabharata, where Duryodhana sought retribution for this humiliation that he felt in the palace that was created by Lord Vishwakarma. So there we have Lord Vishwakarma's contributions having some role to play in some legendary events and very climactic events over the course of time. He is also the one who is supposed to have built the chariots or the flying chariots and some of these technologies that are really awesome and legendary. Tvastā had a son called Trishiras. Thr is three, Shiras is head, so Trishiras is a three-headed one. So Trishiras, with one head he would eat, with the second one he would observe all his surroundings and know what's going on. But with the third head he would be immersed in the Vedas. He was called the Brahmana son of Tvastā. Why do we call him a Brahmana son? Brahmana literally is interpreted as Brahma Janati iti Brahmana. One who is aware, realizes the universal soul is a Brahmana. And he was immersed in the Vedas. Veda is the truth. So anyone who is immersed in the truth has the spiritual luster and has the spiritual power that emanates from the spiritual luster. So Trishiras's spiritual power and spiritual luster kept growing, his radiance kept growing, till the point when Indra, the Lord of the heavens or the king of the Svargaloka, was taken aback, because for him, anyone who grows in a spiritual power becomes a threat, and he could replace him as the king of the Svargaloka. So Indra promptly goes and tries out ways to get Trishiras to reduce his spiritual power. So in order to do that, Indra sends his celestial nymphs to seduce him, the Apsaras. In one of the previous episodes on Indra, we have dealt with Indra and the Apsaras. So that is exactly what he does with Trishiras as well. However, Trishiras always has one head immersed in the Vedas, so he was unaffected by the Apsaras approaching him and trying to seduce him. So having this particular plan foiled, Indra had to adopt other means. Now the other means is basically he simply had to eliminate Trishiras, and that's what he did. He killed Trishiras. When Indra killed the Trishiras, Tvastā, the father of Trishiras, is enraged, and Tvastā creates Vritra, his other son, who is a demon because he is also serpent-headed. So Vritra, the serpent-headed one, goes about swallowing all the waters in the Bhuloka. And once all the waters are taken and swallowed by Vritra, there are famines everywhere and untold suffering for all the beings on earth. And Indra, of course, had to come and protect his beings because he is the lord of all the three worlds. So when he had to sort this crisis, he eventually goes to Lord Mahavishnu, and Mahavishnu requests the Rishi Dadichi to help Indra. And this was no ordinary request, because the only way Indra would be able to defeat Vritra was with the spiritual power of Rishi Dadichi, which is fashioned into his very bones. So Rishi Dadichi gives up his body, and with the bones he fashions the Vajra, the weapon of Indra. And with the Vajra, eventually Indra defeats Vritra. Now, what is the insight that we have from this story, and how does it associate with Tvastā Adityā and also the sign of Aquarius? The sign of Aquarius has two co-lords, Saturn as well as Rahu. Saturn is associated with Brahma. The very first son of Tvashta, Trishiras, was a Brahmana, and he was immersed in the Brahman, and his association is with the Graha Saturn. The second son, Vritra, was a serpent-headed one, is associated with Rahu. So we have both Saturn and Rahu, hence associating the sign of Aquarius or Kumbha. The other association that comes from Kumbha is that it is also the house of Labha or gains, and Tvastā Adityā is the one who gives us higher gains. Let's take a couple of case studies to understand Tvastā Adityā better. And one of the most influential and powerful personalities historically is George Washington. George Washington is the first president of the United States of America, and George Washington has Sun in Aquarius, and in fact Sun is in Aquarius in his ascendant. So all the more we should see a very strong influence, a stamp of Tvastā Adityā on George Washington's life. We are talking about a time which was about 230 to 250 years back, when what we call today as the United States of America was under the rule of Britain, and slowly the momentum was gathering, and these patriotic forces from disparate states within the United States of America were like working towards the ouster of Britain, but they did not have the kind of a common leadership, and they also did not have the benefit of strong wealth of resources. And in such a challenging time, George Washington was entrusted with the responsibility of leading the patriotic forces. We see the nature, the quality of Tvastā Adityā here, where the interest and well-being of the larger population is put ahead of one's own self-interest. And George Washington took over this challenge, and he led the patriotic forces. And again, the Tvastā Adityā's nature of karma yoga, where one goes about performing one's work in a very stoic manner, without too much consideration for what the results are going to be, but one puts one's best foot forward. And that's what George Washington did. He was up against a great deal of adversity. For 8 years, he had to lead the patriotic forces against Britain. He did not have much resources. There was a lack of ammunition. There were desertions in the ranks. He had to encounter harsh climatic conditions which were unfavorable. But despite all of that, he prevailed over Britain eventually, and Britain had to leave the United States. And then he was also then, entrusted with the responsibility of leading the country as the first president of the United States of America. Now again, we see the quality of Tvastā Adityā coming in here, where he had to use his very creative abilities and his ability to innovate and think out of the box to battle these very challenging conditions, and also play a very foundational role. So he had to basically set up the foundation of a country itself, which means he had to set up the cabinet, the various portfolios that would be looking after the various aspects of running and governing a country. He had to set up the bureaucracy, he had to set up the structure, the policies, the foreign relations, he had to assign people to various roles. So all of these, and also the defense in terms of the military and so on. So all of these various aspects of running a country, he did not inherit it already in place, but he had to create it ground up, and he set the foundation for all of this to what eventually became one of the most powerful countries in the world today. And he was also, when it comes to having foundational contributions, we talk about Tvastā Adityā being the divine architect. We again see those qualities. He is the one who pervaded the panel, the constitutional panel, that came up with, that designed and architected the US Constitution. So it was under his charge that the US Constitution saw the light of the day, which continues to this day, and which is one of the foundational pillars of the United States. And also he is the one who set up, like I said, all the fundamental frameworks on which the country rests even to this day. And it is not a surprise that Tvastā Adityā's quality of being a divine architect is also seen where George Washington was professionally trained as a map maker. He was a surveyor and a map maker and a draftsman. So he had the actual skills to do and design maps and architectural drawings and structures. So here we see the blessings of Tvastā Adityā in a very emphatic fashion, where he had the intelligence, he had the creative intelligence, he had the skills, he had the willpower to battle odds and overcome all these challenges. He had also the strength to keep working, do one's work, the karma yoga, and eventually play a foundational role in building a country ground up. Another inspirational personality that we see, who also played a very foundational role in the development of India this time, is Jamshedji Nusserwanji Tata. Jamshedji Tata is the founder of the Tata Group of companies, which today has more than 100 companies, including the massive Tata Steel, Tata Motors, Tata Consultancy Services, and so on. So how did it all start? It actually started in a small little town in Gujarat, Navsari, Gujarat. His parents were from the Parsi community, and his father was the first one who broke away from the family tradition of being priests. And Nusserwanji Tata, his father, set up a small business, and Jamshedji Tata learned his ropes under his father, and he also took to becoming an entrepreneur. And specifically following the revolt of 1857, he set up an export business, and he eventually grew his business and set up branches in China and Japan and Europe and also the United States. So he built his business, and you can see the influence of Tvastā Adityā, or the stamp of Tvastā Adityā here. Jamshedji Tata also has Sun in Aquarius, and you will see how strongly Tvastā Adityā has influenced his life. He took to innovating, he was very creative, and he always spotted opportunities, and he was willing to put in the hard yards to reap the benefits, and not just for himself, he did it in a very selfless manner. Following the setting up of this export-import business, what he also did was he spotted this opportunity where even Indian companies could get into the textile business. Till then it was only under the purview of the British. And the moment he realized that Indians could also get into this business, he bought a very dilapidated mill in Bombay. This was in 1868, which became eventually the founding year of what we today call as the Tata Group. And it all started with the dilapidated mill in Bombay, and in that mill he renamed it as Alexandra Mills, and started producing cotton fabrics. And eventually he also took on a couple of more mills in Bombay and in Kurla, and the group started growing from the initial years in the textile business. And here you see his ability to spot an opportunity in a very difficult time, a lot of adversities. He still took it up, he innovated, and he came up with something that was very viable and that could also create the foundational kind of a basis to grow further. Then, of course, he had this mark of Tvastā Adityā, where he had the vision to see what he wanted to do and had the creative abilities and the knowledge and the skills to go about implementing his vision. So very early he decided he wanted to do 4 things. So what were the 4 things? Because he was thinking in terms of what was required for the development of India, because India was just emerging, or rather it was still in the midst of having taken a beating over centuries of being colonized and being underdeveloped. And he felt that India had to reap the benefits of industrialization. So he set himself a target in 4 areas. One is he wanted to set up a steel mill. Second thing, because steel was very fundamental to having any sort of growth and industry in a country. The second thing, he wanted to set up a hydroelectric plant for power. The third thing, he wanted to have education. So he wanted to have world-class education for Indians, specifically in the area of sciences. So he wanted to set up a world-class educational institute. The fourth thing is also he wanted to set up a world-class hotel, but this was for certain other reasons, which I'll go into a little later. When he, with his sons Dorabji and Ratanji Tata, later worked, they set up what became the Tata Steel, which we know today as Tisco. And so this became a reality 30 years later. And then he also gave the grant in terms of the land, and he actually drew up the blueprint, got the support of people like Lord Curzon and Swami Vivekananda, and then that became the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. It's one of the world-class institutes today, and he was instrumental in doing that. This came up towards the late 1800s, 1898, and then he also went about building this iconic Taj Mahal hotel in Bombay. The reason being that at that time, as an Indian, he was not given entry into one of the high-end hotels. So he decided that he will set up a high-end hotel for the benefit of Indians. So today, Taj Mahal Hotel still stands as one of the icons of Bombay or Mumbai. So he went about giving a manifestation to all the dreams that he had, and he accomplished this. Now, how did he do it? It is through the core philosophy of Tvastā Adityā, which is a karma yoga. And what did he believe? He believed that the only way out of poverty for India was through disciplined industrialization, which is the core philosophy of Tvastā Adityā as well. I hope you enjoyed this episode on Tvastā Adityā. I'll hope to see you next week again as we take up our last Aditya among the 12 Adityas. Till then, take good care.